Welcome to the Soulish Podcast. My name is Whitney Apke and I'm your host. On the Soulish Podcast, we talk about the soul journey, the body, soul, spirit connection, and I bring on guests who are thought leaders, truth seekers, body workers, energy healers, intuitives, relationship coaches, astrologers. We have it all on this podcast, and we have it all because the soul journey is a complex journey. And today I have an amazing guest, Alea Lovely. We talk about owning who we are without fear. And I think this conversation is such an important one because it is hard to step into full authenticity without fear, without anti-belief, which is one of the things that we talk about in this episode. And Alea shares, how to heal that anti-belief. If you don't believe that something is possible, how to heal that. As well, she shares this really awesome process called the Imagine Method. And I thought that was really, really cool. It's a step-by-step process on how we can make our dreams actually happen in this life. And she's amazing. A little bit more about Alea. Alea Lovely is an energy healer, spiritual teacher, and the creator and host of the Spiritual Ship podcast, which has topped the charts, gaining a #1 spot on iTunes spirituality in America, which is really amazing. She grew up super religious. Her and I have the similar background as far as Christianity, growing up in the church, all of that, being really involved. And she has spent a large part of her life basically realigning with her own identity. And I think it's really awesome because the way that Alea approaches life is by recognizing who you are, recognizing any limitations that are holding you back from who you are. And that's what I love about her. She's just raw. She's just truly who she is. And she has stepped into so many facets of who she is already. And she is gearing up to step into a new adventure, which is really cool. She just talks a little bit about that. More to come on that. So definitely make sure that you follow her if you don't already follow her, that you stay up on it because she's about to do amazing things and even bigger things than what she's already accomplished in this world. And really her mission is just to help people really claim who they are, step into their authenticity, not be afraid to discover new things, venture elsewhere, and have amazing adventures and stepping into your true self, awakening into your true self. And she also does energy coaching, card reading, workshops, as well as her amazing podcast. So if you don't listen to her podcast, if you don't follow it, subscribe. All those links are below here in the show notes so that you can connect with her and follow her if you don't already. But Alea just gives so many little nuggets on this episode together on owning who we are without fear. This is an amazing podcast episode with her. It's been a long time coming that I've really wanted her on the podcast, and I'm so honored to have her as a guest. So here's our episode together. I hope that you enjoy and feel inspired and encouraged. And before I get into this, thank you so much for being a listener. Please subscribe, share. That helps get the word out. And the goal of this podcast is to encourage and inspire others. So thank you for helping me on that mission. Love you guys. Both cancers.
Yeah.
We in our feels. What is your moon, by the way? I
I'm
actually
Aries
don't know.
moon.
Oh, okay.
I know. Kind of intense. Scorpio rising.
Oh,
Even
that's
more
so
intense.
cool. Oh, I love it. I'm a Pisces moon and Aquarius rising. So
The water, air.
yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
water to your fire.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. So we can start with this. I loved your birthday post, and you and I, for everyone who's listening and watching, like, we're 2 days off from each other. I'm July 16th, 1987.
84.
84? No
Yeah,
way.
I'm
Girl, you
old.
got good cheekbones. Like,
Thank you. My Native American ancestry comes
I
through.
love it. Yeah, no, you look like you're in your early 30s, girl. So
Thank you. I will take it.
yes. But I loved your birthday post because it was so inspiring, and you and I vibe in the same as far as like reflecting on our year and our life and where we are, where we have been, where we're going, and all of that. But your birthday post was so it was just inspiring. The title alone is like, this is the year of I can, and I just think that's like what a powerful statement. But I loved that you were asking and just kind of saying, like, in all the ways that I spiritually, physically, mentally, I've been considering these ways of which things that I leave on the table because of the fears of the past or past experiences, whether previous lifetimes, this lifetime. I thought that was amazing. And just basically how we can see the versions of ourselves, see our progress, be in our journey. And that's what it's all about. So if we can just even start there, I mean, that's so yummy and juicy. It's so good.
Well, it's an interesting time. I think like it's an interesting time in the world. It's an interesting time for me in my personal life. I think like the micro always affects the macro and so on. But I got to this point where I just started to feel like I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of being worried about what other people think, or if I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, or I'm in the process of starting a new podcast. And so like I was kind of scared, like, what if everything that I built is going to go away and I'm going to be
Mm,
talking differently? What I'm creating is going to be different. What does it mean to step into the full authenticity of who I am and who I'm becoming? And my mom has like always complimented on my ability to reinvent. And I
mm-hmm.
love to reinvent myself. She said, I'm like Madonna. Like you just go in and
Yes.
then you change your style and then you do this and that. And I do the same thing with my house and with my clothes and whatever. But humans are change machines, like there was the definition of like, let me see if I can find it real quick, but the definition of like being alive essentially is like the differentiation between inorganic matter, basically like us being able to say that we're alive versus not alive. They kind of talk about how like the ever changing until death, basically. And
Mm,
so I thought about it and I was like, wow, humans really are change machines. So if we find ourselves in these places where we're kind of comfortable and we're not necessarily happy, some people are very comfortable in being happy, but if we're not happy, then there may be something blocking us from being able to achieve wherever we're trying to go. And so I started this personal practice on looking and seeing like, okay, what are the things that I'm afraid of? Like the top things that I'm afraid of. Typically, I'm afraid of discomfort.
mm,
It's a dynamic that most of us are uncomfortable with when we have to change something. I'm
yeah.
afraid of failure. Obviously, that's the biggest one probably.
Yeah.
And then I'm also afraid of succeeding. And that's
Mm,
one that a lot of people don't talk about, is that like if I really undertake this and I really like do all the necessary parts that I know are possible for the type of success that I know that I deeply want, there's this other caveat that says, okay, well, now this is going to be putting yourself out there. This is going to mean that you're going to be seen. That means there's going to be more and more people who are going to disagree with you or look to cancel you or look to argue with you or talk about how you look or whatever. And a big part of it is like I'm working on my self-image as far as my body goes.
mm.
And
Girl, me too.
listen,
Hello.
it's a forever journey. But upon having my daughter, I started to notice like the things that I criticize about myself are the things I
Mm,
love about her little body. And
mm,
so me coming to a place of saying like self-acceptance, self-love, not wanting to be a bad example for her and her own self-image and for her to appreciate her own body, but then that fear of like, okay, well, if I really put in all the details that I want to be successful in whatever it is that I'm doing, that means people are going to see me, like not just hear what I have to say, not just know what my message is, like they're going to have to physically see me. I'm going to have to be on YouTube videos. I'm going to have to go up and speak in TED Talks or whatever. Sure. And that terrifies me.
mhm.
It terrifies me to be seen in that way. And for a lot of us who've suffered trauma or rejection or judgment or any of those things, it's difficult. If we just live, if you're in a female body, you identify as woman, like even if you don't, like there's so much criticism on who you are as a human. And so it makes change very difficult for us because there's always that kind of like instinctual, like, we're having to protect ourselves from the T-Rex essentially of judgment.
Yes. Yep.
So in that post, I was kind of saying like, I'm ready to let myself be seen. I'm ready to move past areas where I've been fearful and before, just utilizing what I think works. And I've always been really good about being able to see a clear, like an intuitive thing, like just a clear direction for what I need to do and be successful at it. But this is different. It's like
Mhm.
I came into my 38th year. I'm like, okay, well, there are things that I've been putting on the back burner for 3, 4, 5, 7 years because I'm so scared. of letting myself be seen. And I
Mm.
know Spirit has talked to me about this and said, listen, like it's now or never.
Mm-hmm.
This is the thing that you set out to do. So if you're not willing to do it, we'll give it to somebody else. We'll let somebody else do this. Or whatever. I'm like, no, 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 no. Don't take my opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But to get into that space of starting to own who I am, own what my voice is, not be afraid of the failure aspect, because all I know is that up until this point, all of the failures that I have had have taught me so much about what to do in the next step, the next facet, the next reinvention. So they've all been highly beneficial.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm sure everyone listening and watching is like thinking of their top three fears. I think mine too is like I'm afraid of being powerful and being rejected or being told that I'm too much, right? Because I can have that personality that can be very strong. I was very strong willed like all growing up. So
Mhm.
I think I've learned to taper that. And I've
Yeah.
learned to not show up in that power and authenticity, which is actually to help people break through. It's actually meant to help and be supportive, not bulldoze over people.
Right.
But I think a lot of times I have felt like that has been the result. So I've learned to not show
Mhm.
up that way. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that actually kind of freaks me out. Is
Yeah.
like, ooh, if I say that thing, how much hate am I going to get? How
Mhm.
much backlash am I going to get? And even we were talking like, podcasting, we know, we vibe,
Yeah.
but even some things that I edit out that I've said, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to edit that out.
Just
Because
in
that was
case.
just in case, because that's
Yeah.
like, that's maybe a little too on the line. And I know that there's wisdom in that and discernment for sure, but there is an element too of like, well, what would be the consequence of me showing up in the way that I feel is actually most authentic and helpful and supportive, not only for myself, but for other people?
Mm.
And am I showing up in that way, or am I afraid to show up in my authenticity, like you were saying? I think
Right.
that's amazing. And you also mentioned like leaving things on the table. And I think that's an interesting thing as well to look at of like, what am I leaving on the table? What am I taking off the table?
Right.
Like, what is your process of deciding or kind of getting to that place where you decide what it is that you want to keep, what it is that you're going to let go? Like, what is your process with that?
That's a great question. Um, the process is quite tumultuous, actually, for the most part. In this current stage of my life, I can say that when when I know I'm leaving something on the table is when I can feel that kind of trepidation around what it is that I want to do. And
Mm,
so when I'm sitting down and kind of like, I'm a goal person. I like to write down my goals. I also try not to be like too strict about it because it's like life is not all about goals.
mhm,
But I sit down and say, okay, what is it that I want to do? The first thing that I want to do is get clarity about what that looks like. And so I developed what I call the Imagine method
mm,
and imagine recipe, whatever you want to call it. Because whatever it is that we want to do is typically a manifestation. The way that people think about manifestations right now are, I want to, get a car, I want this new house or whatever. And it's like anything that you want to do in the world is a manifestation of a thought process of something that you had dreamed up, something that someone told you, whatever. It's all a manifestation of that. If we lived in a simulation, everything that's to be built in front of us in our projection would be some version of a manifestation. So when I
right.
use that word, I use it more as what ends up developing in our life. And so because of that, I developed this kind of, this is going to be a very long answer,
I love it.
but this essentially method to help people kind of sort out what their manifestations are. And it first starts with deciding what you think is a good life. Because the very first thing that we all need to know is what are our priorities that drive our manifestations of what we'd like to manifest.
Mm,
And in those, like, say it's five, I say top five are usually pretty good. My top five are family time, creative inspiration, being able to have my passions achieved, financial security, and romantic love.
mm,
And so in those are the things that seem to be at this point in my life most important to me. So the manifestations that I want to have in my life, like more time with my kid, or I need to work this particular job, or I have this, I want to get this speaking engagement or whatever. These are part of my top five that make my life feel like a good life. Everything else is frosting. Everything else is extra. Okay. So it helps me sort with what my authentic desires are versus what my inauthentic desires are.
That's really
Authentic
good.
desires are what come out of your heart, like what you're like, this is my jam. This is what I know is my purpose, that kind of feeling. Inauthentic desires are like, I have to get this bag because so-and-so has this bag and then it'll make me a better influencer, like stuff like that. Not that
Yep.
influencing is a bad thing, but like if we're being influenced by others
Right.
about what we think we should have and we think we're less without it, that's an inauthentic desire, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So out of that, it helps us at least categorize where our manifestations are coming from, or at least which ones are most important. And so from there, the reason I call it the Imagine method, it's an acronym. We start with inception. Where do you start? What are you starting from? What is the position? You want to lose weight? Okay, where am I starting from? You want to get this another job and higher ups or whatever? Where am I starting from? Being able to look at your surroundings and get clarity about where you're at helps you know where you want to go. Okay,
Mhm.
because if you're trying to imagine that you're driving, if you don't know where you're actually at, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get there.
Right.
So I think that the inception point is really important as well, because you start to see where you're starting versus where others are starting. Now, this is kind of important because oftentimes we try to compare ourselves and our manifestations to other people. We try to
Right.
see like, oh, well, they got it in 5 minutes and it takes me this long to get it or whatever. It's so unfair. And while
Mhm.
it may be unfair, at least being able to acknowledge that it's going to take you longer to get there will give you a better like head on your shoulders about what's happening. And I
Mhm.
use this to talk about privilege as well. Because if you notice that so-and-so went in and got a bank loan and you couldn't get the bank loan, there may be a reason for that, but
Right.
it doesn't change the circumstance. So how can we shift our perspective to see, okay, well, it may take me this long, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna
Mhm.
show up anyway because this is my authentic desire. This is what I
Yeah.
want. So it gives you kind of that charge to like move in
It's
that
really cool.
direction. Next thing is
That's cool.
manifestation, which is very clear. Get clear about what you want. A lot of people don't actually know what they want. And if they're not unsure about what's their authentic versus inauthentic, it'll be hard for them to get clear about that. So
Yeah.
that one's pretty straightforward. But the next one is anti-belief. And so what is the belief that shows up when you say, I want XYZ? Mine, I'm working on my body right now. I would like to lose this amount of pounds, blah, 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 but I can't because I have PCOS, I have endometriosis, I have insulin resistance, I have blah, blah, blah. And it's like those things get in the way of me thinking that this something is possible. Oh, I can't get a partner because I'm X. So what comes up for you in that moment? Like that's the process. I really want to be the next Oprah. Oh, but I can't because why? You know? So
So
getting
good.
in touch with that feeling or that belief or whatever, at least gives you the hurdle that you can, at least you can
Yeah.
see it. Because when you
Mhm.
trip over stuff and you're in the dark and you're like, I don't know what happens, you just keep falling. At least it gives you like, okay, I'm not going to trip over that over there.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can step over it. It gives you the ability to be able to step over it. The next one is growth. And so growth point is being able to look at that hurdle and say, I'm willing to step over that, but it may take some discomfort to do so. It may take a couple of tries. It may take that I'm training or whatever in order to jump that high. It's going to require effort in some capacity or another to be able to do that actual thing. And so recognizing that discomfort is required. It's a requirement for the dynamic of shifting your awareness, shifting your abilities, shifting your clarity even. It's the growth point that changes that dynamic. So then the next one is I. It is integration. So it's
Mm.
the point between like when you're driving halfway through that road trip and
Yep.
you're like, all right, I'm kind of in the middle point. I have a choice that if I can keep on going or if I'm going to stop. And at this point, you've probably gotten the ball rolling on whatever it is that you want to do. But maybe you're one of those people like me who are control freaks and want to keep doing, like keep touching it, messing with it. And please let me and pray. And let's get this one.
Mhm.
Let's call this number and let's make sure. And oh, they say this? Someone's calling you for a date, double text, triple text, 14 texts. Like it's like at some point you have to let it go so it can roll on its own. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So the integration point is where you recognize that discomfort, you started to strengthen your skill and whatever the thing is, and you're able to let it go. At some point, you have to let the GPS take you where you need to go. At some point, you have to take your hands off of things in order to let that coalesce. And so then you have in, which is noticing. And noticing is like the synchronicities, the magic that happens when we let things go. We've put our desire into the universe and we are allowed to start to see the magic happen. It's kind of like the little coincidences that you're like, hey, wait a minute.
Yep.
Hey, that's close to. this might mean this. And, like noticing that to me produces more of it. It's the magic in being able to see things start to shift and change, and it gives you more power to let you know how powerful you are. It's the aha moments, the angel numbers that follow you, stalk me, to let you know you're going on the right path. It is the observation. It's not the doing. It is the taking the time to watch your manifestation take form.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have E, which is expansion. So I find that a lot of people don't talk about what happens after you get your manifestation.
Yeah, it's true.
And this is what that is. Like the expansion node is essentially like you get what it is that you want. You're happy with it for 5 minutes. And then you decide you want something else. I want something bigger. I want something better. Like it's like a small period of time where that manifestation still fits you, but then you outgrow it at some point because you've expanded. So you want something better, greater, different, whatever. It's a reinvention process. So at the expansion node is to kind of help you understand that it's not that your intuition was wrong or that you don't want the thing that you wanted. It was the growth point to help bring you back to you. You wanted that job. You finally got that job. Now you have this coworker who's like the absolute worst, right? You wanted that baby so bad, and now you can never sleep.
Yep.
You're never allowed to sleep, like you wanted that partner, but now you have to share things and plans and, whatever. So there's always some kind of growth point. Our manifestations are not for us to just get stuff. It's for us to grow. And so I think in that point, it allows us to move a little bit slower when we're talking about what we want to leave on the table versus, take off the table. Essentially, it is us being able to acknowledge what's really important in our priority in our life, and what are we willing to do for it? Like, what are we willing to move for it? I know manifestation has been talked about in the way of like, ask, believe, and receive, and it'll show up at your front door, but action is required. And I think it was kind of more of it's the first wave manifestation talk, like The Secret and stuff like that. But I feel like there's so many other cross nuance points like that. There's a lot of work that we have to do first before those affirmations actually work.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You got to put gas in the tank.
right.
You got to do maintenance on that car. And I think also is thinking that manifestations are a destination when they are
Right.
literally just a stopping point. It's a pit stop. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's a desired pit stop, but it's not the end all be all. So
Right.
like what you said of expansion, it's a lot of times I know in my own life I've like manifested something, and then it's hit me like the wait, but I want more. And then I think, wait, did I want the wrong thing?
Right.
Like you kind of doubt, like, ooh, was I like wrong with wanting this manifestation? I guess that's not me. And
Right.
I internalize. I'm such a huge internalizer. So I've realized that it's like, no, it's actually just a part of the journey. Like you said, it's getting you there. But you're always kind of getting there. You're always expanding. You're always growing. You're always experiencing. You're always doing something new.
Humans are change machines.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if that is something that you wanted at some point you're going to grow out of that. Like, I'm in the process, like I said, of changing my podcast, doing a new podcast. Why? Well, I feel like I've met every challenge here, and I'm ready to do something else. I want to help people in a different way. So it is part of the process, but some people are afraid of doing that. They're afraid of moving in a
Oh, yeah.
different direction, and like what that would mean. Will they lose what they've built? And it's like, if you built it once, you can build it again. The secret, you can build it better. You can build it faster. But we need to be able to at least encounter that anti-belief that's stopping us from doing that.
Yeah, that's really big. And do you mind going into that? Because I think anti-belief is is like I know for me in my own life, like that's been one way that I have stopped or not continued on or been held back or limited, hindered, blocked in some way. What are some ways that you recognize, acknowledge, and then heal that for yourself or
Well,
help people heal?
like the recognition part, to me, I think for some people that's the hardest part,
Hmm.
because it will seem like the reality. It doesn't seem like it's a belief. It seems like it's the reality. So let me give you an example. I'm a woman of color. I'm a mixed Black woman, mostly Black. And I have situations in my life that have incurred deep racism. And so there have been moments in my life that I've had deep beliefs about myself and my parents, places that I can go in, ways where I can fit in, whether or not people will like me or not, whether I can date these people or not, all kinds of things, right? And because of my experience, like it shows me that in the world, this is how things are. This is how it looks. Like people won't date me because, or I can't go in these places without people treating me like this because. And while that may be my reality, and it very much was, at some point, it kept me from being able to move in a way that I would like to and say, it might be like this, but I can do this anyway. I can have this anyway. I can do this experience anyway because I'm me. And like my color shouldn't matter to this degree to keep me from doing those things.
Yeah.
Now, it shows the nuanceness of the reality of the world that we live in, very real.
Mhm.
It's not that they believe that and they made it up in their heads, but
Right.
the actual belief that needs to change is that I can do it anyway.
Mm.
So it's not about like the anti-belief being racism exists. It is the anti-belief being racism exists and I can't do this because it exists, and
Yeah.
changing that part. Like racism exists, but I'm gonna do it the fuck anyway. So it's
Yep.
this transformation of perception that allows us to come out of that. Now that's a hard thing to do. So
Mm-hmm.
how do I do that? I got very intimate in doing that over and over and over, because I come from a very poor background, churched, as you said earlier. And I remember when I was in, I don't know, sophomore or junior year in high school, something like that. And they're like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think I want to be a photographer and, whatever. And so I was in my little like film class and stuff. And I had this teacher, of several teachers, who kind of would brush me off when I was like, oh yeah, I want to be this big photographer. I want to do this kind of thing or whatever. And then like not really believing that that's something that I could do. And because of my dad, thankfully, like my parents were very like, you can do anything. You can do absolutely everything, almost too much, like very much on the millennial snowflake scale. Like
I love it.
you are special, you are this and that. And it's almost
Mm.
because of that inflated belief that I had in myself that I could do anything. My dad also has very like, when we were little and we would get in trouble if we said we couldn't do something.
Ooh.
Like if we were, oh man, I want to draw this, but I can't. Like, okay. Like I remember one time he made us do push-ups. So just
I
stuff like
love
that.
that.
Like I was in a household that reinforced, hey, like we don't, that's a negative belief instilled in yourself. Now, as a result of my parents growing up in a older generation, Martin Luther King's generation, like they knew like this would be important to instill in our children for them to be able to do what they need to do. So
Yes.
luckily I grown up like that, but I grew up from very little means. And so at some point, like there got to be a point where people were telling me I couldn't do stuff. And out of just pure spite, Aries moon, like I was like, watch me. Scorpio rising, like very much
Mm-hmm.
watch me. Okay. It was out of my own rebellion that I was like, nobody's gonna tell me I can't do this, like look at my podcast. It's called Spiritual Shit. Like my parents were like, oh, you sure you want to name it that? It's like, watch me. So it was almost for myself, it was almost out of this need to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
And while that doesn't need to be most people's motivation, it was mine. It was, I had friends who were like, oh yeah, I'm going to go off to get my master's. And, they had all of their student loans paid for by their parents. And I was like, racking up student loan debt and didn't get the same scholarships. And, like I had to transfer schools in the middle of my junior year because I couldn't afford to go to my school anymore, just stuff like that. And with everything I fought to finish that degree. Fought. And once I got out of school, it was like, okay, well now what? I ended up
Mm-hmm.
being an admissions counselor at William Joel. And then I was taking some pictures for a friend of mine who wanted to be a model. And he was like, hey, would you take some pictures? Didn't you take photography in high school? Something like that. And I'm like, yeah. Took some pictures of him. And we went to a scouting agent, and scouting agent looked at the photos and said, who took these pictures? And he's like, she did. And he points over his shoulder and she's like, are you a photographer? And I said, no. She said, you should be. And it was in that moment, like just one person saying like, you can do this, that I went and bought a camera. And then 20 years later, I'm still a photographer, like part-time now.
I love
And I've been published on covers of magazines. I've been all over the world because of my work. And it's because like in those early years, people saying, oh, you couldn't do this. I said, watch me. It was the driving force of me doing everything that I've done in my life up until a few years ago where I was like, I don't really need to use that anger or that feeling of that chip on my shoulder that I had that drove me for so long to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah.
I am who I am, and I do what I do because I want to, not because I'm trying to prove somebody wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So, to answer
Yeah.
your question,
Yes. And I think that's huge too, of the motivation behind what we do, what we
mhm,
think, how we speak, what we
yeah,
say. I think that's huge because I know, I'm obviously a white woman. I have Native American roots as well, but I think what I've come into is also that realization of the system, the society, even within religion, of like
yeah,
I was never ordained as a pastor. They actually wouldn't announce that I was a youth pastor because I'm a woman, and because
mm,
that church, which was technically my dad's church, we merged churches at one point, and the other church didn't believe that women should be pastors or be in ministry, yet I'm serving in a leadership
right,
ministry pastoral role. But yet I'm not going to get titled because of that. I'm not
mm,
even going to get paid. Right. So it's like,
what?
yeah, and I went to school for this. Like, this is what I went to
Yeah,
school for. But even asking my dad, and this is no fault to him, like, love him, but he was also reckoning with this because of, the fact that we had two churches, two different kind of states of being, but he didn't want to say it to me. But I remember asking him, like, will you ordain me? Like, I want to be ordained by you. I could have been ordained by my school,
yeah,
but I don't want to be ordained by them. I want to be ordained by my dad. And I
yeah,
think ultimately I was wanting that mantle transferred over. He did that with Aaron when Aaron was like 16, passed his mantle, his anointing. That's what in Christianity it's meant to be. It's kind of a big deal. It's basically him acknowledging that Aaron is meant for ministry, or whoever it's being done to, that you're
yeah,
called by God, right? Never did that for me, not
mm,
once. So I think in that reckoning and healing of like, why am I never chosen, or why am I never
yeah,
experiencing this thing of being acknowledged, like you were talking
yeah,
about, of
mhm,
being told that you can and that
right,
you will, because
yeah,
of who you are. Um, I think that's something that a lot of women feel that
it's a
way or
great
have
parallel.
experienced.
Yeah,
Yeah, even men though. I think in all of our lives and experience, we all experience at some point being not acknowledged or validated or confirmed, whatever word you
mhm,
want to use. And there's that doubt. And so I love the fact that you shared that. And thank you for sharing that, because it's so encouraging of, yeah, we don't want to do things with a chip on our shoulder to prove people wrong necessarily, but that is
but it
also
worked
part
for a
of the
while.
journey. I think that's part of the journey. Again, another
Yeah.
destination, another stopping point, right? And then
Right.
you get past that point of needing to prove people wrong and prove yourself right.
Mhm.
And you kind of get into a whole new world of like, so now what?
Yeah.
Now that like I no longer have this agenda driving me, now what is my agenda?
Right. Right.
And that's part of the expansion, which is really great. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to kind of ask you, like, is there anything you want to share of like what you're doing, what you're going towards? Like, what is the new vision for you, if you want to promote it at all? I don't want to put you on the spot or
Oh,
anything if you're in process, but
we're in process. So I don't even want to tell people the new name yet.
yeah, yeah,
But I will say this, like I have spent the greater part of 4 years really doing deep spiritual exploration. And we've had every guest on my show that I can think of, every
amazing guests on your
expert.
podcast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Even people that weren't, very highly published or anything like that, but brilliant people on the show telling, us about everything from, past life regressions, NDEs, just, or like simulation theory, all the things. And it really is reflective of the journey I was on, because I wanted to just be open to everything. I'm a spiritual agnostic at best. And I like, even though I have like some firm beliefs, like for the most part, they're very fluid, very
Hmm.
open. And it's because of, the way we were raised, like you couldn't be open. Everything had to be just so, and this is the line. And I didn't want that in the world anymore. If I was going to do something that was going to just be open and allow anybody, really to come and tell me their perspective, if I thought it was interesting, of course, because I was in the exploration process.
Yeah.
My aunt recently died like a month ago, and it
Mm.
was so sudden. She passed in her sleep. And it was just like this, was so jarring because you always think you have more time. But
Mhm.
in that, I was talking to my partner and we were having this conversation. Me and him have been together for almost 3 years. And we were having this conversation and I was like, what do you think happens when we die? And I didn't realize I never asked him that question. We've always
Mm.
talked about religion, talked about everything. And he is like, I think that when we die, we just die. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, I think we just die. Like, I think that's kind of it. Like, I don't think our memories go with us. We maybe get absorbed back into the collective, all there is. But like, I think we just die. And I was like, what? Like, I was mad because I was like, wait, how do I know that? Not know this about? Are you an atheist? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so like, we're having this conversation. And like, I mean, and he's cleared it up for me. It was a beautiful answer that he gave. He said he's an emotional atheist, that he's been hurt by God. And in his space,
Mm.
emotional atheism means that it's the belief that takes the least amount of energy. And I thought about that for a while because I thought, I don't have a belief currently. I have some things that I circle around, things that I think that are quite true. But I never really ever fully settle on anything. Everything is a theory. I'm a philosopher by nature, I think.
Yeah.
Everything's just a theory to me. But either way, there is this part of that feels like, energetically, is this really making things more clear? I don't
Mm.
know that it is. I think that I've asked so many questions, which are wonderful. And I would never take that back. I think that that was part of my process and necessary for me to do. It was kind of like when after I got out of really toxic, abusive marriage, I went and dated for 3 years, like literally everybody. Just what I call my hoe phase. Went through, just dated any and every, like, oh, you look cool, kind of whatever. I had never dated. I was with the first person who liked me and that was it. And like, I had never explored in that way. And so I needed to figure
Mm.
out exactly what I liked, exactly what I didn't. And so in the same way, I did that 3 years of exploration of just 3 or 4 years of just let me try on everything and see like what I like, what fits, what doesn't. And so what I came to is like at the end, like my aunt passing away, asked the question, what is a good
Mm.
life? What does it mean to
Mm.
live a good life? And I've been doing research now, of course, I can't stop the research, but I've been doing all these thoughts, thinking about like, okay, energetically, is this draining me? Doing energy audits, like certain relationships, friendships, what are my have tos versus get tos? Why do I do certain things over other things? Does this measure up to what I think in my manifesto of good life things fit, you know? And so if I'm not living according to my manifesto of like what's taking the least amount of energy, what's going to be giving me the most energy, what's going to make me not necessarily the happiest, because I think happiness is by measurement is very fickle.
Yeah.
But what is best for my life? Like what is good for my life? And what's good for my life is time with my family, being able to travel and be inspired, having good conversations, connections, love, being able to achieve the passions that I've set out to do, and so on. So if they don't fit in that parameter, me doing a lot of the questioning of my spirituality, maybe not the best thing for my life anymore. It was at some point. It's
Yeah.
just not anymore. And so I think that what I'm moving into is that whether or not we know what happens when we die, or if we're an alien or a star seed, or if we're all of these things, it's wonderful to understand that deeper. It's just that at this point in my life, I want to help people learn how to appreciate the life they have today, the
Yeah.
things that they can see, the things that they understand. And it's not that you should negate your spirituality, not at all. Like spirituality is at the core of who I am, but it is that I would like to help people make better what they have in front of them, the things that they can know. And
Yeah.
so I'll never fully ever leave the spiritual questioning or anything like that. I like, for instance, me having my daughter, she's 17 months and going on 14, and just the freaking light of my life, like
Ugh.
so frustrating and amazing at the same time. And I'm watching her through new eyes. I'm watching the world through new eyes, see her discover things for the first time. And I'm going, wow, like even if we die and we die and nothing ever happens, YOLO, you know, and if we do and we come back 1,000 times, it's wonderful. I don't want to miss this.
Mm.
I don't want to miss out on this. Like her little laugh just recharges my soul.
Oh yeah.
It's my stepdaughter's birthday today,
Mhm.
and like getting to hang out with her and see her personality. She's expressed a interest in photography, which makes me so but it's like being able to give to that and like make decent human beings in the world, like that's important to me. So if that's the case, like I have built up an entire platform that will live in infamy. Okay. It'll be there for anybody who needs it. Go to Spiritual Shit if you're doing the questioning. There's 184 episodes up now. Like that will be there. But I want to start helping people be able to look at their life now and see the magic that's in that.
Yeah. Yeah. The magic in the present moment and not missing it. Because I love like Eckhart Tolle, right? The power of now, like all
Mm.
of that. But it's true that like when you really sit in this present moment, in this present conversation, what it's doing, the magic that's happening, you know, what it is that is nourishing, what it is that is inspiring and encouraging and lighting us up as we're having this conversation and those who are listening and watching. I mean, that is huge. That's everything. Cuz we
Thank
aren't, like you
you.
said, we're not promised the future,
Right.
you know?
Right. Well, just to see like when you experience someone close to you pass away, all of us do that kind of like existential, like, oh, like what's going on, what happens, are they there, are they not there, whatever. um and I just it gave me focus on what's in the now. What is it that I'm a very like future oriented person. I love
Mhm.
plans. I can't wait until this. We're getting married next year, so it's just like,
Ugh,
oh, like I can't wait until this. Oh, we're in a wedding, and oh, we're going to Paris next month for some engagement photos and whatever. Like I'm just always thinking about those things in the future. I've always been like that. And so being able to stop and look at the present from not like like a lot of times when we hear in spirituality, you need to be present, you need to be this, you need to be that. It feels like a must, like something that's not fun.
yeah.
Like it's like we're obliged to be present. And what does that really mean? Like what does it mean to be present? But it's a new skill, a new interest, even I would say for
Yeah.
myself, of like being able to say, you know what, like for instance, I'm talking to you, and it's really, I love like the sound of your voice is really soothing, which is awesome.
Oh,
If you're a
thank you.
podcaster, being able to have this conversation, being able to have the opportunity, to be able to sit with someone, and that we live in the world now where we can connect with someone we've never met before and have this kind of conversation for the first time.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing. Like, do we
Yeah.
never marvel at that? That I sit down with people I've never met before and get to have these kinds of conversations? Never in a million years. Like
Yeah.
that would have been our experience, and now we
Mhm.
live in that age. We're in the future now. So with that, I mean, if you're like a millennial cusp kid where there was before
Yep.
internet, like we can see
Yep.
that now. It's magic in and of
Yeah.
itself. And I
Yeah.
want people to know that like the things that they're looking for, the magic that they're looking for, particularly in spirituality, everybody wants to get on the starseed train and whatever, like that's fine. Let's talk about aliens and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. Super interesting. I'm really into it. But
Fascinating.
why do we think that they have something we don't?
Right.
If aliens are watching, observing our Earth, we must be pretty damn special. Because I'm not sitting down watching an ant colony right now do their work. You know what I mean? Like
So
if
true.
that's the case, if they're super involved, then we have something here. I get chills.
Yeah.
Like there's something special about humans, and whatever that may be. Like whether it be our ability to be present, whether it be our Earth plane in that it is linear and we have time. Like time doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Well, it kind of does. It doesn't, but it does.
Here.
It's a construct, but it's there. Like aging exists.
Yeah.
So we can measure things like the way that our bodies are able to carry children. Like our mammals are able to carry children, just like that in and of itself. Like I felt the most powerful when I was pregnant,
Oh, I
like
bet.
the most powerful. I'm like, I'm over here making a liver. What are you doing today? You know what I mean? Like just something
I'm
about that.
accomplishing things
Like
and I'm just sitting here.
so I mean, and not to say that like people who cannot have children don't feel
Right.
that in different ways, but
Right.
it was my best example that I had that
It's
showed me
fascinating.
like, wow, the body is magic, like just pure magic. Our
Yeah.
ability to be able to connect in that way to, our womb, other people, like all of it, like it's fascinating to me. And I
Mm.
think that we've put so much emphasis on the fascination of what could be, versus being fascinated with what is.
Yes. Yes. And with, you know, whenever anyone's listening to this episode, we were talking earlier, and I just really feel like we're in such a really kind of critical
Shift
transition
time.
shift.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone can feel it. I was even tuning in and I just felt like, there's a lot of people that don't want to be here. I feel like collectively we're kind of in that place where it's like, what's next? I'm not satisfied with my life, and maybe even suicidal ideations, like that type of thing of like even thinking like, can I just get absorbed into like
The
the
collective.
nothingness that is God, Yeah, like
Yeah.
can I end this? And even for people that believe in reincarnation, it's like, can I just hit the restart button?
Yeah.
Because this isn't working out, this is hard. So I think there's a lot of that. I'm at least feeling that energetically in this shift and in this time of letting go and releasing and going into what we want, manifesting, expanding, like even realizing, oh, what I wanted is not satisfactory anymore. I actually want more. I want something completely different. And how do I achieve that? That can feel very, very daunting to do
Yeah.
something new, like what you're in the middle of doing. And
Oh, it's daunting.
it's daunting.
But it like you said, like this feeling of not wanting to be here anymore. I want to speak on that if I can.
Yeah.
Because I've felt like that too, especially like with, COVID and everything that's happening in the world or whatever. It is, I can't say for sure, but I have felt very seriously that our earth has gone through a shift. I think
Hmm.
we're like in the transition of it. It started, at least I think, around the summer solstice.
Hmm.
And then also 2020, all of that kind of went down. So in that, like the difficulties, and the only thing I think that I hear that feels comforting is that we came here for this.
Yeah.
Like this is the maximum amount of growth that we can experience at one time.
Catalyst.
Like we're so excited. And I'm like, that's super comforting for those who believe that. But
Right.
for those who don't, it's like our world looks like it's falling apart. And while it may be, sometimes things need to fall apart in order to be put back together better.
Hmm. Hmm.
Things that if something's already broken, has a terrible foundation, it needs to be completely demolished in order to build
Right.
something new. So we may be going through the demolishing period. But to me, I think that in that space, what happens for those of us I felt like that, like, oh man, this sucks. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. Um, it's typically because we're focused on the future. What's going to
Yeah.
happen? I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I'm afraid that this, like jobs and money and violence and this, there's such change. Look what's going on in Iran right now.
Right.
Like never, and a lot of people can say this is horrible. This is terrible. It's almost like a holy war that's going on, right? And
Hmm.
there's this transformation happening that women are going, no more, no more,
Yeah.
risking their lives, being killed.
Yeah.
Like, and it's horrible. It's horrifying to watch. And they are changing history. They are changing history. The bravery of those women, like just they're fighting for the same thing we're fighting for here, the right to choose.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean? So like,
the rights that we currently have as women that we fought for, it's like they're doing that in their own country. It's amazing.
right. And so there is a shift happening where it's like, all right, no more, where people wouldn't have spoken up at all before. And now we're seeing the demolishing happen. And
Hmm.
it is terrifying. It is shocking. It is horrifying at times. And at the same time, they're doing it with a cost, like for purpose to change. Like when all this stuff happened here, George Floyd and all of the racist protests and whatever, like we're
Yeah.
seeing the underbelly of what we didn't have to look at before. And some people still don't have to look at, but come from underneath, because that needs to be cleared out. It
Yep.
needs to be cleared out. So, it doesn't feel great. It's like, for instance, if I've been eating like shit for the last 3, 5, 10 years, and I decide I'm really going to start doing something with my diet and I have to work out, that's going to be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I'm going to have to make different choices. I'm going to have to change the way that I live. I'm going to have to participate in things differently. I'm going to have to get used to something different. There's discomfort in growth. And I think that that's, as a society, as a world, that's what's happening.
Right. Yeah. It's a reckoning. like where things are being righted, I think, as well as exposed. But this is I really loved your birthday post to just come back to that and even maybe close on this is like this is the year of I can. And
Hmm.
we're seeing that. We're seeing people like the women in Iran say, like, no, this is the year of like,
Yep.
this ends here. This is
Yeah.
not going to continue for generations. I'm no longer consenting, like, consenting by not, you know, not fighting this. I'm no longer going to consent to this narrative of how I am and that I can only do or be certain things.
Right.
Like, this is not going to happen for the next coming generations. Not my daughters, not my
Yeah.
granddaughters, not my great granddaughters. This ends with me. And I
Yeah.
think that's woo. So, in what ways can we do that in our own life? In what ways have we been called in this life to heal the things, to reckon with the things that we say no longer, even if, like, I have no kids, I may never have kids, but I know it ends here in this life, whatever those things are that I need. And I came here to heal from ancestral lines, past lives,
Yeah.
karmically. Yeah.
Hmm.
Just even for
Yeah.
my soul journey,
Yeah.
I'm ending it. So
Yeah.
it's
You
amazing.
can do it.
Yes. Yeah. We can do it. This is
Yeah.
the year of we can. I
Yeah.
can. Yeah. So amazing, Alea. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing
Thank you.
so much. I'm so excited for what's to come for you. This is going
Thank
to be
you.
amazing.
I
Yay.
appreciate it.